The Sigma 17 to 40mm is getting a lot of attention lately in the APS-C world, and for good reason. I think it's the most exciting APS-C lens release of the year, and after weeks and weeks and weeks of waiting, I finally have my own copy that I purchased. Now, when I initially did my review and my comparison videos, a lot of you guys asked, how does it compare to the mighty Sony 16 to 55G? So in this video, we are going to do that comparison. I own both of these lenses, I paid for them with my own money, and frankly, in my eyes, it doesn't matter which one of them wins. I think that I'll probably keep them in my collection for at least a couple more years, and I also have the Sigma 18 to 50. Who needs money? Speaking of, this video does have a sponsor, and that is Storyblocks. More about that later. Now, these two lenses have prices that fluctuate nearly as much as your favorite altcoins, so check the links down in the description if you want to check current prices on these lenses, because depending on when you watch this video, the whole scenario might be completely different. All right, let's begin the ultimate, most important comparison perhaps that ever has been. Physically, these two lenses are a lot more similar than you'd expect. The Sigma is about 1.5 centimeters longer overall, but it is internally zooming, so it stays this size no matter the focal length. The Sony, on the other hand, starts to grow in length as soon as you start to zoom, and fully extended, it's also about 1.5 centimeters longer overall. Weight is 492 grams for the Sony, 526 grams for the Sigma. When you are holding both in your hands, you can't tell a difference. What you can tell is the Sigma is built from better materials, and it has a more premium finish. The Sony is not a poorly built lens. It feels like every other Sony G Master lens out there. It's high quality plastic, it's good. The Sigma just feels a level above. The Sigma is made in Japan. They are very proud of that. The Sony is made in China. In terms of controls, the Sony has a very nicely weighted zoom ring. It's very smooth. The manual focus ring is a little on the light, nearly loose side. With the Sigma, the zoom ring is lighter to rotate, very smooth, and the manual focus ring is just as smooth with the perfect amount of resistance. Both lenses have autofocus manual focus switches. Both have focus hold buttons. The Sigma has 2 of them. The Sigma also has a dedicated aperture ring that can be clicked or declicked depending on your preference. 67mm front filter threads on both. The Sigma has 17 elements in 11 groups, but the Sony has 17 elements in 12 groups. So that's one more group. Both lenses have many advanced elements, and both have linear motors controlling autofocus. Now, before I show you the comparison images, let me tell you about Storyblocks, the sponsor of this video. Storyblocks gives you unlimited downloads of stock video, music, sound effects, images, even templates, all for one predictable subscription. No hidden fees, no worrying about how much you're downloading. It lets you experiment more, test different vibes for a video, and freely create. Their library houses over 1 million high-quality videos, images, and motion graphics templates curated by real artists. So whether you edit in Premiere Pro, in Resolve, or Final Cut, there is a huge selection of assets to choose from, and this saves you so much time. On average, Storyblocks saves members 3.5 hours a week, plus everything is royalty-free and pre-licensed, so I never have to stress about copyright claims. For a YouTube creator, that is peace of mind massively. If you're working on videos, whether it's YouTube, client projects, or just for fun, definitely check them out. For a limited time, get 2 extra months free when you sign up for an annual plan at storyblocks.com/Arthur or with the link down in the description. Thanks again to Storyblocks for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get to those comparison images. So let's begin with a portrait here around 40mm. I'm going to keep all of these Sigma images on the left and all the Sony images on the right. This is wide open f1.8 versus the Sony at f2.8, and this is really the first time I'm looking through these and zooming in, so I am going to be discovering this as you guys do. Sharpness it looks a little bit better on the Sigma. This eye is a little bit slightly out of focus on the Sony, so not quite as sharp. And then look at this pole behind. This is always an interesting thing. Both lenses have some color fringing. This is Bokeh, longitudinal chromatic aberration. Seems like it's a little stronger on the Sony, but we'll confirm that with some other images. Now, when we stop down the Sigma, this is what we get. And you'll see, wow, at f2.8, it is looking just tack sharp, razor sharp. I'll zoom in just to show you guys. I mean, look at this. These are unedited JPEGs straight from my camera, and hopefully you guys can see the sharpness in the eyes in comparison to the Sony. there is a difference. It's not huge, it's not massive, but it's significant enough if you are zooming in and punching in. Let's move on to the next one. This is done at around 24 millimeter on both. Punch in, and here wide open versus f2.8 on the Sony. Sony looks much better here, a little bit darker. Sigma, I would say, looks just as sharp. Colors are a little bit nicer, I think, on the Sigma. I don't know, it looks a little brighter in my eyes. But let's see what happens when you stop down. What I'm seeing here is a clearly sharper image. I'd say a little bit better colors as well, but the eyes is where you notice it. You notice it in the skin. Not saying that the Sony image is bad on its own, it's really not, but in comparison to the Sigma is just amazing on another level. Let's take a look at the background bokeh. This is, again, both at f2.8, so we should have similar bokeh balls, but the Sigma art has larger bokeh. You could see not perfect circles in the corners, neither lens has perfect circles, but looks like the Sigma has slightly smoother bokeh even when you stop it down. And we'll confirm that later as well. Here's another one. This is at 35 or 34, I guess. And we will punch in wide open on both lenses. And again, I am just hoping this comes across in the recording. Super tack sharp. The Sony's really good. It's really, really good. But I'd say it's about 90% of the sharpness in this image. There's something about the way that the Sigma renders. Yeah, it's special. And this is wide open, guys. This is f1.8 versus f2.8. If I stop the Sigma down, this is what I get. So it even sharpens up a little bit more. I mean, this is, yeah, it's really, really good. The Sony was never a slouch on its own, but compared to that Sigma art, it is something else. Let's zoom in and take a look at bokeh just for a quick second. You can see nice and round, a little bit bigger with the Sigma. With the Sony, it's pretty good as well, fairly smooth. There is a little bit more outlining, I think, here, but we will look at some other examples to confirm that. Obviously, you can make the Sony match the Sigma if you add a little bit of sharpening in post. Here I took a couple of different samples at around 40 millimeter on both. This is wide open versus f2.8 wide open on the Sony. This is too close. It's so close. It's so good. But again, I'd have to hand it to the Sigma. It's just a little bit better. The bokeh wide open, you'll notice 1.8 versus f2.8. So you get more perfect circles. You get a little bit of cat-eyeing football shapes here with the Sigma, but you'll notice that inside the bokeh balls are nice and smooth. If I zoom in on the Sony bokeh, they are showing some onion ringing. So this is not ideal. And again, fringing on the outside. So there's fringing on the Sigma as well, but this is not preferable if you are looking at bokeh. I would take cat eye and smooth bokeh versus the kind of onion ring effect. If we stop down to f2.8 on the Sigma, you'll see that the bokeh balls become circles, and you'll see just how much smoother they are compared to the Sony. None of that busyness in the middle of the balls. They are nice and smooth. Very, very good in comparison. The other thing that you might want to look at is flare control, f2.8 on both. This looks pretty good. The flares are quite interesting on the Sigma. I kind of like them. They are kind of clean. You'll see a little less contrast or more of an effect on contrast levels around the flare on the Sony, but very close performance between the two. Stop down to f4 on both and you'll see there is not much of a difference. I'd still say more contrast levels on the Sigma, sharper overall. You'll see more details in the skin versus the Sony. This is way too punched in. So I'd say that in the area of sharpness, the Sigma is right now undefeated. And then looking out at the bokeh, here the Sigma cleans up quite nicely at f4, whereas the Sony at f4 still has some color fringing. So this is Bokeh on highlights, which is not great, and you'll see how busy the bokeh is as well. So something to consider. If we look at sharpness across the frame, stop down to f8. This is what that looks like. This is about 35 millimeter on both. You should see pretty similar performance across the frame here. Let's see if there's much of a difference. Pretty close, might be a slight edge to the Sigma. This corner does look a little bit sharper to me. I'd say that looks a little sharper. Let's take a look at this side. very close. I think I would still say somehow the Sigma is a little sharper. Look at the foliage here and here. Even stop down to f8, I am seeing a difference between these two. Here, let's take a look at flare performance again. This is 24mm f2.8 on both lenses, ISO 100, same shutter speed. This is very similar. I'm just looking at contrast levels, and I'd say there's slightly more contrast with the Sigma lens versus the Sony. I don't know if you want to call these sun stars yet, but there's fewer of them here with the Sigma, more of them with the Sony. But if you're looking at colors overall, I'd say that there's more contrast with the Sigma. And then the other thing that I wanted to do is compare color fringing here. So this is not supposed to be in focus. So especially this area back here. So I'm going to zoom in and see if we see color fringing difference between the two. And you'll see that both lenses do have some Bokeh, but especially out here, it looks like it's suppressed a little better on the Sigma. You see some teal and purple with the Sony. The Sony lens always had color fringing. I think that the hardest thing for a zoom lens, especially a fast zoom lens nowadays, is to suppress Bokeh. It's an annoyance that you have to deal with, especially if you're doing up close stuff all the time. This is just f4 on both lenses. Another portrait done at 28 and 30 for some reason on the Sony. And so again, we'll see a little bit of difference in contrast levels. I'd still say that the Sigma here looks just a touch better at f4, but let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I think it looks a little bit cleaner in my eyes, but it's very, very close. Again, stop down, and you'll see less of this blue teal color fringing on these highlighted areas. So here's a tough high contrast area, wide open on both lenses. Focus point is this stop sign, so you see that's in focus on the Sigma. And then the reason I took this is because it's challenging. This super bright railing that's thin on a high contrast line, it's not about focus. This does not need to be in focus whatsoever, but you'll see Bokeh fringing, and it doesn't look like the Sigma has as much Bokeh fringing here. So this is better than this kind of green and bluish tint that we see from the Sony image. That's not ideal. And then again, because the Sigma is f1.8 versus f2.8 on the Sony, you can shoot with lower ISO values. So here is an image demonstrating that. 35mm roughly on both, same shutter speed. This is just f1.8 versus f2.8, ISO 4000 versus ISO 1600. Look at how much cleaner f1.8 is in low light situations versus f2.8. So this is really where the Sigma has its advantage, and that's the whole idea behind this lens. That's why this lens is so amazing and so exciting for APS-C shooters, is because it gets you so much more light, and it behaves more like an f2.8 zoom would on a full frame camera. The close focus is slightly better on the Sigma, but neither one of these is as good at close focus as the Sigma 18-50 that I already compared to the 17-40. So if you really do shoot a lot of macro stuff, semi-macro stuff, I'd recommend the 18-50 for that type of work. But second best is the 17-40, the Sony. Really, one of the things that I dislike about it the most is the minimum focus is pretty far. Now the Sigma does have some vignetting, so this is f1.8 and this is f2.8, so 1.8, 2.8. The corners do brighten up a little bit as you stop down. Compared to the Sony at f2.8, the vignetting is not that bad. So that's f2.8 on the Sigma, f2.8 on the Sony, and that's pretty much a wrap for the comparison. Alright, so what usually happens with these types of comparisons is everyone who owns whatever lens rushes down to the comments to defend or to point out the single scenario in which their lens is still better for whatever reason. And I get that, you know, you spent a lot of money on a lens, you want to see it succeed. And honestly, for me, I don't care if you buy either one of them. I don't care if you hate both of them. Maybe you're just watching this video because you're curious how they stack up. Maybe you want to know which is the best zoom lens right now with the Sigma just being released. Maybe you just want to hang out with me as I talk about lenses. If you're looking for a decisive statement, the Sigma is the better lens. It simply is. And then you make that statement and people will still go down into the comment section and say, well, sharpness doesn't matter. If anything, a lens that is slightly less sharp is better for portrait work. This is like arguments in a marriage. It's a no-win situation. If you lose, and if you win, you both lose. For video work, they are both great lenses. The autofocus is a complete wash for me. I found both of them to be snappy, silent, accurate. At no point have either of these lenses let me down in the area of autofocus in all of my testing, and one is not better than the other. If focus breathing matters to you, here is a side-by-side comparison of focus breathing on both of these lenses. Now, the zoom range is important to discuss. On the wide end, 16mm versus 17mm, that's a difference, but it's not huge. On the telephoto side, the Sony is giving you 41 to 55, so quite a bit more reach, and that is nice to have. Still, the Tamron 17 to 70 should be mentioned here as the ultimate best of all in one lens if you are just discussing range. But with these, I think they are the two most premium lenses that you can buy for APS-C, and that's why this comparison makes a little bit more sense. And then we come down to the price. I bought the Sony back in the day a couple of years ago for $1,100, and at the time I felt like I overpaid. Little did I know it was like buying Bitcoin at $50,000 because the current regular price is $1,700 US, but it's currently on sale for a whopping $1,600 US. The Sigma, on the other hand, is currently $919 US, so even at the sale price, there is a $700 difference between the Sony and the Sigma. Yes, you can find the Sony for less on the used market, so that is a consideration, but if you are looking at a new lens, I can't think of a scenario where the price of the Sony honestly makes sense. This, after all, is an f2.8 zoom versus an f1.8 zoom. The extra light is massive for low light, massive for subject separation. It's a big deal, especially on a compact body such as this. If Sony ever made a 17 to 40 f1.8 zoom, I would bet money that it would be pushing $3,000 US for an APS-C lens. So as you can probably tell, I think the Sigma is a good deal. It's not a cheap lens. I think that $900 is a lot, but there is no other lens like it on the market that performs like this on APS-C as of today's date. Even compared to Sigma's own prime lenses, this 17 to 40 outperforms them. Apart from that Sigma 56, that is a tiny gem. So I highly recommend this Sigma lens. It is the ultimate walk-around zoom lens for any current APS-C system. I haven't tested anything better up until this point. If you are okay with f2.8 and you want the range of the Sony, I wouldn't recommend buying one for $1,600. I'd find a deal on a used one, or better yet, maybe pick up the Sigma 18 to 50 for around $600 US brand new, and you'll get the same performance as the Sony, even better close-up ability in a smaller, lighter body. If you don't need the best of the best, really the 18 to 50 from Sigma is the second best. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. Let's discuss these lenses, how they perform, which is your favorite, and I'm curious if anyone thinks that the Sony is a good value at $1,700 US. As usual, thank you guys so much for watching. Check out links to these lenses down below. Also check out story blocks down below. Stay tuned for more. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.